has to shift from a small security team to security becoming everyone's responsibility, because we don't have enough security professionals in the world to keep up with the number of developers that we have in the world, right? And that's what's really driving the movement to DevSecOps, where security becomes everyone's responsibility.
Do you think this shift to containers and Kubernetes in general is going to force the shift to DevSecOps? I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine how you might actually be able to operate without it.
Exactly. It's definitely accelerating the shift to DevSecOps, because in the old world, it took 6 months to develop a monolithic application, and then security teams would come in and bolt security onto that application. In the new world, you're deploying applications every 6 hours, and security has to be embedded or has to be built in as part of that infrastructure. So while containers inherently are secure because they're ephemeral, they're immutable, but it's the configuration of how you deploy those containers, how you manage them through the orchestrator, which is Kubernetes, becomes extremely important.
All right. So is there a set of best practices? Historically, I'm asking this question because we've always taught people about defense in depth, layered security practices. And I wonder if the same thing isn't going to apply on the shift left side, right? We'll give tools to developers, but then there's stuff that has to happen at the CI/CD level. So what is the defense in depth strategy for developers?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about this cloud native application stack, Mike, and you think about microservices, containers, Kubernetes, the way you had to think about security is in 3 phases. First part is what we call secure the build, which is securing what goes into your applications, right? So if you're downloading any images, making sure that they don't contain known vulnerabilities, right? So securing the build is one important part of the shift left movement that we are seeing in the industry. The second big part of it is securing the infrastructure. So Kubernetes, as you know, has become the de facto orchestrator for cloud native applications, right? It's often referred to as the Linux of the cloud. But Kubernetes has a lot of controls. And if you don't properly configure that infrastructure, then that can lead to misconfigurations, that can lead to breaches, high-profile breaches that we've seen at companies like Tesla and Shopify. And then the third piece, even if you do those 2 things, so you basically, what you've done at this point is made sure all the windows are locked, all the doors are locked, you have an alarm system in place, but that doesn't prevent attackers from breaking into the system, right? And so when they do break it, you also have to then secure your workloads that are running in production. And that's the third piece of it. So securing the build, securing the infrastructure, and securing the workloads. And that gives you a comprehensive defense in depth strategy for your cloud native applications.
What is your sense of awareness of security issues when it relates to containers these days? I feel like we talk a lot about it, but it's not clear to me that developers are getting the message yet, or that we're still waiting for some massive constitutional crisis to happen before everybody starts thinking about this a little more aggressively. Where are we in this maturity journey?
Yeah, like shifts that we see in every industry, the adoption curve is still on the early side, Mike, right? So there is growing awareness around security issues. I think developers are aware of the security issues, and I think they're also becoming more aware that it's part of their responsibility to address them as well. And we're also seeing a greater involvement from the security vendors to shift those controls left and make it easy for the developer to consume this information, right? So imagine if you're a developer, you're working in your CLI tool or CI/CD pipeline, and you're about to go and build a application with a certain set of images, and those images contain known vulnerabilities, right? And if you can provide that feedback to that developer in the tools that they use on a daily basis, then they're more likely to understand it because they'll get the information right away. And if you provide the right explanation as to why it's a bad idea to publish this with the known vulnerability with the CVS score of 10 and how to remediate it, then they will of course do it, right? I mean, it's not like they don't want to do it. It's just providing them with the information with with what it means, why it matters, why they should care about it, and how to remediate it. And once you do that, we are seeing that developers are embracing it and say, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense, because they know that it's going to save them a lot of headaches at the back end, right? If they design the application and if they build the application with security in mind.
When I talk to security people about this, then in their first 5 seconds, they're excited. They're like, awesome, we're going to get some help. We're undermanned. And then the next breath, they kind of start thinking about it and they go, oh yeah, wait a minute. You're asking me to trust the very people that I've kind of considered to be the enemy of security for the last 2 decades, and that they're developers and they never did the right thing. So how do we get security people on board for this transition?
Yeah, I think what they have to, there has to be a cultural shift, right? We saw this cultural shift, Mike, with the DevOps movement, right? If you recall, there was this chasm between developers and operations teams in the past as well, right? And then they realized that, okay, we need to collaborate and work together, and hence the DevOps movement. Similarly, where we are seeing a DevSecOps movement, where there has to be willingness from all parties involved to be part of the solution, right? So we are seeing companies where they're embedding security personnel as part of the DevOps teams, hence, DevSecOps, right? We are seeing folks with DevSecOps titles, and they don't report up to the product, to the InfoSec or security organization. They're reporting up to the product or engineering organizations, right? So part of it is also infusing security talent inside product and engineering teams and making security a first-class citizen, right? And we are definitely seeing this movement across many of our customers, and that is going to lead to a fundamental change in the way we do security. Historically, security has been challenging because it has been responsibility of the few, and it has been bolted on after the fact. And if you make security a responsibility of all, and if you embed it as part of your existing processes, and you built it as part of your applications, as part of your infrastructure, then it becomes much more permanent. And I think we have a unique opportunity here as we are migrating from monolithic applications to cloud native applications to fundamentally change the way we do security for the better.
All right, this is one of those classic Ronald Reagan trust but verify kind of moments.
It really is. And look, you trust the developers with the right thing. You give them the tools to secure the build process. You put a gates in the deploy process. So make sure you build it correctly. If you deploy it, we're going to check to make sure. We're going to verify it before we deploy it in production. And oh, by the way, even after it's deployed in production, because 0-day vulnerabilities do happen, right? And misconfigurations do happen. We'll also make sure that we are monitoring it at runtime. And if you see any anomalous behavior, then we will flag that as well. And then when you flag it, you want to make sure you feed that feedback back to the build and deploy process. So you're addressing issues not just at runtime and get into a whack-a-mole where you fix the same issue over and over again, but you take that information and you fix it in the build and deploy phase so you don't run into the same issue again. Right, and that whole process that's DevSecOps, and that's really what's going to allow us to continuously improve the security posture of our applications.
All right. What ultimately differentiates StackRox then? Because it seems like the space is pretty crowded for something that's just getting started. There's no end of players. So what should people be looking out for when they think about the vendor they want to partner with?
Yeah, I think there are a few tenets that are core to our design principles that we started with. And we strongly believe in that the orchestrator, when you think about container security, the orchestrator is really the control plane, right? And the orchestrator, the de facto orchestrator is Kubernetes. And so over 2 years ago, we made a strategic bet on doubling down on Kubernetes because we fundamentally believe, Mike, that the orchestrator is the control plane for your infrastructure, and it should be where you inject your security controls. It should be a control plane for security as well. And so we made sure that our product was native to Kubernetes, native to the infrastructure, and we leverage all the rich declarative information available in the infrastructure, all the controls available in infrastructure for policy enforcement, right? So, and what that allows you to do is make sure that you can implement security as code. You are implementing controls that are not colliding with the orchestrator, right? And that really leads to security at scale, and it reduces operational cost and operational risk. Let me give you one simple example of that. If you detect a rogue process that's running, right, and you want to stop that from running, you can leverage Kubernetes to instruct it to say, hey, go kill that pod or go kill that process, right? And when you do that, Kubernetes knows that's a bad process, kill it, I'm going to spool up a new process, and everything works beautifully. And that's our approach. The other vendors, the approach they take is, okay, I'm going to kill that process on the host, on the infrastructure. The moment you do that, Mike, Kubernetes doesn't know that something has been killed. So there's a fundamental misalignment between what's happening at the host and what Kubernetes thinks is happening at the host. And that's what creates massive issues. And that is fundamentally a flawed approach, right? And it's inconsistent with the orchestrator. So our approach in a nutshell is that we are native to the infrastructure. We are native to Kubernetes. Hence, we call our platform, we distinguish ourselves as being Kube native security. So I hope that makes sense, because it shows up across every single use case that we enable for our customers, where the advantages of Kube native security is lower operational cost, lower operational risk, and greater security at scale.
All right. The issue is the left hand will not know what the right hand is doing if somebody else is killing the processes, right?
That is that's a great way to say it. I wish I had thought of that. So thank you. Exactly. We ensure alignment between the orchestrator and the underlying infrastructure running containers.
Hey, Kamal, thanks for coming on the show.
Mike, thank you as always for having me. Such a pleasure.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Mike. Great stuff. All right, it's time now to go over to our analyst corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell has some great commentary and video for us. Mitchell, over to you.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. A lot of things that I pay attention to in the market just because of the kind of work that we do and some of my background in history and security, running IT, network and DevOps and other things. So, but my point being, there's always some interesting activity that tells you, where things, gives you a little hint of where things are going. I've talked before on Analyst Corner, really as a form of encouragement for all of us, because of my experiences going through economic downturns in the past. I know many of you have as well, right? If you've been around long enough, it will happen to all of us, right? And probably multiple times. So anyway, those cycles go. And, some of those have been pretty painful, nothing like now, certainly not in terms of the loss of life or the severity of the damage to the US economy, world economy. But a lesson from all those experiences is in that significant disruption comes significant opportunities. Some you have to find, some you create, some are presented to you. And so I'm always looking for how do things shift in the market. And there's really two things I want to talk about. One is to give you an example of a transaction that may not have occurred 6-9 months ago and now is because of that. Cisco announced that they're acquiring Babel Labs, I assume it's Babel, not Babel, however you pronounce that, who has AI software for removing background noise from any kind of video or audio, really. I mean, it could be a meeting, online meeting, obviously. That's what they bought it for WebEx, but Cisco has a huge line of collaboration software, video software platforms and audio services. So I can imagine that they would use it quite a bit, in a lot of their products. So you can certainly see why one investment in technology like that makes sense. Would that have happened 9-12 months ago? Hard to say. It didn't, and it did now. But also the demanding pressures and expectations of customers on existing products like WebEx and online, GoToMeeting, Zoom, and everything else. Yeah, the customers use it more. They have increased needs, expectations. There's opportunities for more things you can do. You can offer the customer. Matter of fact, out with, it was back in maybe it was pre-June time, they came out with their kind of WebEx meeting hub, basically ability to manage meetings better or more easily for an enterprise. And at that time, I think they said this was June 16th, if I remember right, that they had 25 billion meeting minutes in the month. And it was a 3x change. I mean, that's how much traffic had changed, usage had changed in that short period of time. So massive. I mean, we all love our businesses to increase by 3x. I'm not sure revenue matched that, but the connection and the tie and the on us, a meeting service like WebEx or any of the others is a big plus. Some interesting things I thought happened along with that. I mean, we've had much greater emphasis on security. I mean, you saw issues that Zoom had. Cisco, in their case, came out with some new security features, all of that, things like data loss prevention, retention information, recovery, data about meetings to not only manage it better, but also for compliance reasons, for legal search, legal holds, all of those kind of things. If you've run IT, been in that part of IT, depending on your company, those may happen quite frequently. So that, adding new capabilities, they upgraded their encryption, I think, from AES 256 to GCM. Again, kind of up in the game. Maybe some of those were catch-up features. I'm not necessarily lay out which were which, but it helps me understand kind of what's happening, because while that's like a micro event in the system of our economy, system of our technology landscape, there's so many of those things happening all at the same time. I was on a webinar this past week with Alan Shimo, who's CEO of Media Ops, and Rajat Bhargava, who's CEO of ShemCloud. He's been CEO of several companies. And actually, Alan and Rajat and I go way back to early 2000 when we worked together in a company called Still Secure, co-founding. We've been in those kinds of investments together, and to some degree worked off and on with each other, probably more Alan and Raj than I have since then. But it was great to get us back together, because we had this point of reference for what had happened in security really over the last almost 2 decades, at least 15 years, and some of the things that's really changed pretty drastically in the market. And it occurred to me, there's kind of a really interesting analogy to what's happened in our world. One being driven by work from home, if you want to take that one thing. And there are others, I believe. But essentially, we've kind of flipped it 180. If you take some percentage of people that were who could work from home but are working in offices, and a small or much smaller percentage of folks who do work remotely, either work remote full-time, travel, and are remote full-time, whatever it might be. And you kind of flip that 180. And now most people who are able to are working from home in their home offices, or what's been made into a home office. Maybe those percentages not exactly reversed, but certainly flipped. Kind of think of the seesaw flipping from one way to another. And how disruptive that is to a system. I mean, there's an immediate need to equalize, kind of create the new equilibrium, at least to hold things together, continue operating, which can sustain you for quite a while. But at the same time, as that settling out happens, when you change something that drastically, you start to realize that, well, how we thought about doing a meeting, or how we thought about working, or how we thought about leading people, or how we thought about security when we're building it to be network-centric versus distributed device and user-centric, or whatever it might be, that it really is an upending function, and it creates huge opportunities for new companies, new products, and innovation. It also can be really uncomfortable. Disruption sounds like a negative word because there are some negative consequences to it, but there are also kind of positive to it. And what kind of happens when things shift that much, they change that significantly, is it settles out. You can think of a magnet. How matching north to south ends of the poles on the polarity of two magnets will come back to equilibrium, come back together, and south to south, north to north will push them back the other way around, right? It's looking for what is the place where the connections make sense. Now, in case of a magnet, there's one way it's going to work, right? South to north, north to south. But in our case, that magnetism of wanting it to bring back to a new place is what creates some new capabilities. And we were talking about, if you were going to design a network, if you're going to design how you're going to do user identity, device identity, access control, some of those kind of things. And when you come out of a network-centric world where you've built the network as part of your data center, part of your company, and you have things that interface to you, to flip that the opposite way, where I don't have to have a data center. Maybe I do, but a much smaller one. And that changes the dynamics about how you would design that. So you might go with a more distributed option. You might go with a strategy that says, I'm going to assume most applications I'm going to use are not going to be my own. They're going to be SaaS. They're going to be third party. They're going to be cloud services. All right. Now, how do I design whatever it is, my network security, my identity management, directory services, application strategy, integration strategy? Flip it from that opposite direction and see what makes sense that way. If you're going to start that way, how would you do it? And not all of us are starting from a clean slate. Most of us aren't. We've got momentum and things that we've already implemented and decided upon, and strategies gone. But we can also still take that idea of, let's flip things to be the opposite. And if you were in that situation, what would you do to solve this problem, or design this kind of a network or security strategy? And even though we're not exactly in those conditions, those ideas can still potentially apply to where you are, or may move you a step or two downfield, maybe to that direction or not. But it's a great way to kind of innovate, ideate on perspectives, because you need something to get out of the current perspective that you have. That over time, in the music studio, I have a lot of fun doing a little bit of recording here, instrument recording and some vocals and things. And you get ear fatigue. You stop hearing what's happening coming over the monitors, the audio monitors. And you just can only be there for so long, and then you have to step away and let your ears get a rest. That's kind of the same idea. You need to get away from looking at things from the perspective that you've been looking at them. And I've also used that. I don't know how I came upon this. I'm sure it was somebody's idea, and I took it and thought it was mine. But it's also a great way to get unstuck from a problem. Or like every path we go down to try to solve this problem, we run into a dead end, or we run into more problems, or we run into something we can't figure out, or this looks worse than where we were. And oftentimes that same approach of, well, let's take the opposite situation. If we did exactly the opposite, like for example, what if we didn't have a network security strategy or something really ridiculous like that, right? You're not even going to do that. What would you do if you didn't have a centralized network security strategy? Well, okay, I might design things this way and look for these kind of services. And oh, here's an idea. That actually would work for us where we are now. So I hope you get my point. Is this a shifting upheaval and disruption, and this wanting to kind of settle back to where we were, or figure out what the next point of settling equilibrium looks like? That taking that 180 approach can be something that's super helpful and give you kind of new insights. You may never go that direction that way. It may not even make sense, but there's ideas and things that can be generated by looking at things from a different perspective. So I hope that's helpful. Kind of some interesting insights on the market and fun things that I like to watch, and of course, people that I talk with and companies and such. So a lot of great things happening at Accelerated Strategies and also at our sister company, MediaOps and DevOps Institute. So all great companies to be working with and reading their content. And we're excited to be doing more work with our customers. We're doing some studies around how software teams work and how that can inform or improve how we collaborate working remotely for the rest of the company. We're getting close to wrapping up some Kubernetes data security research. Both of those things are going on right now, so you can go to the Accelerated Strategies website and be part of our research. We would sincerely appreciate that very much. And we'll be having some deliverables come out of that not too far down the road. And of course, some other things in the works too. We'll talk about those as they get nearer. You have a wonderful day. Be safe, be well, and be careful out there. Have a good day.
Join topic experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event. Observability to enable your digital initiatives. Are your apps and services distributed in the cloud, getting refactored as microservices, or becoming more complex? If they are, you must factor in observability. Observability is all your data to help you find unexpected failure conditions, explain why they happen, and resolve them fast. This event is about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices.
Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for Monday, August 31st. I hope you've had a good August. We've got another month in the books. I will see you next month, which is tomorrow, for Tuesday, September 1st. Until then, stay well, stay safe, stay strong. TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.